You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. I'm your host, Mo, and today is a Solo with Mo episode. So you're in for a treat because the questions are coming from Chat GPT. But before we get started, I wanted to ask a favor of you all. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, or maybe today is your first episode, and you feel like you've gleaned something from it, you've gotten something from it, would you please go leave me a review on Apple? I don't put that reminder in my podcast very often, but I've been now going for almost 3 years. As of June 2025, it'll be 3 years. And so I want to check in with all of you and ask, what are you wanting to hear more about? After this episode, do you have more questions for me specifically about anything that I've shared about on here? I would just love some feedback about what you'd love to hear more about, what you've loved, what you haven't liked as much, maybe what else you'd like me to include. Anything and everything, I'd love to hear from all of you. So thank you for that. So as I mentioned, this is a Solo with Mo episode, and I was encouraged to start doing these solo episodes back when I first started the podcast because I oftentimes find it very easy to talk about other people and to interview other people and have a harder time sharing about myself unless someone else is asking me questions. And so in order to share more with all of you about how I think, how I run my business, different tips and things that I use to motivate myself in my own life, I was encouraged to start doing these Solo with Mo episodes. And so most recently, I have been playing around a little bit with Chat GPT, just seeing how I could play with it and utilize it in my business, because I really have not at all. And so I was feeding it information about myself because, of course, being who I am, the first thing I thought of to use ChatGPT for was to give it all of my astrological information, give it all of the results from any personality test I've ever taken. I gave it my birth information, and so I've been asking it different questions about like when would be the ideal time for this to happen in 2025 for me? Like when should I plan my next retreat? When should I plan my next class? So I highly recommend putting that information in there because the more information you feed it, the more it gets to know you, and it can shape, of course, the answers and things that it gives you. And I also asked to speak to one of my spirit guides, Toth, through ChatGPT, which was fascinating. So I highly recommend playing around with it for that reason. And then I thought to myself, well, it'd be really cool to ask Chat if it would give me the questions to ask for my solo episode. And so I said, could you give me 8 questions based on the information that I've given you that you would ask me in order to share more about myself in a solo podcast episode? So it gave me 8 questions, and then I ended up asking for 3 more. So I have a total of 11 questions to go through, and it's a mix of questions that have to do with personal aspects of myself and the business. So I think this will help. Perhaps if you don't know me very well and you want to get to know me more, just know how I operate and why I do what I do. Hopefully, this episode will help you. And if you have any follow-up questions from it, I would love to hear them. So here we go. So the first question Chat asked me was, what has your journey of embracing your intuition looked like, and how did it become your superpower? So this is an interesting question to start with. It has looked like a very slow and painful process of learning to trust what I felt in my heart and my body. And I just knew in the knowingness. So I had to get far along enough in life that I had truly done the work, in quotation marks, done the work, gathered enough education, information, and then had tested the data. I'm very logical when it comes to kind of my approach to trusting myself. At least I had a logical approach when I first started. And then I had to start this process of learning not to doubt myself. And so I've kind of broken it down into 3 different pieces. One, I had to live enough life where I had a number of experiences to pull from, and I had a good sense of what my ego versus what was not my ego, and I had to recognize that I'll never know everything. So I had to be mature enough to be able to step back in any situation and recognize how I was responding and where it was coming from. This part of the journey or growth is hard because you are getting messages from your intuition right away in the beginning when you're young, but it's sometimes hard to tell, or at least it was for me, because you're also learning what it means to be human at the same time. So the first step was I had to really have enough life experiences to begin to pull from those experiences and have something to work with. The second part was I had to learn to slow down and unwind the conditioning from society. In what ways was I doing something just because I had been told I should be doing it or I was supposed to be doing it? And at what times was I doing something because I truly wanted to? That was the second piece. And then the third piece has been I had to start to step into using it as my superpower. I could start to do this when I could decipher when it was my intuition versus programming. And then I could also trust myself and thus embody myself, embody this. So, this whole journey of embracing my intuition has been, I would say, like the first 35 years of my life was just gathering data, like having experiences so that I could see how I responded and what I learned. There's always something new to learn. And I wanted more information so that I could make sure that I could trust myself. And then this learning to slow down piece really didn't start to happen until I started to meditate and I started to realize how fast I was going and how much I was trying to do. And that message came to me in a number of different ways. Thankfully, like my mentor, Enmei, one of the first things she said to me was, Margaret, stop doing and start being. And I didn't really understand what she meant right away. But as I started to meditate, I started to recognize, wow, I don't really pause very often during the day or during the week or during the month or during the year. I am constantly going because for me, there's always somebody to serve. There's always somebody who needs something. And I was constantly in this state of doing because I wanted to help people. And I thought that that was how I could do it. And so learning to slow down and unwind from this conditioning was really difficult. The other part of that was not just because I had been going for so long and going so fast, but I also really wanted to make people happy. Like I really wanted to make my parents proud of me. I really wanted them to be happy. I wanted everyone around me happy. And so when I stopped doing some of those things that I felt like had been told that I should do this, like by school or by religion, or when I stopped doing that stuff, the shoulds, when I stopped shoulding on myself, um, relationships changed, right? Some of my friendships changed because all of a sudden I had stopped a pattern. I had paused a pattern. And so some people in my life were like, well, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? I don't like that you stopped doing this. Or when I started speaking up for myself and saying what I truly wanted to do, it was upsetting to some people because it then forced them to change, right? That's something that Gary John Bishop, if you haven't heard of him before, he has a couple different books that I've read. One of them is Unfuck Yourself. And it's a great book. And one of the things he talks about in that book is how when you change, you knowingly or unknowingly are actually forcing other people to change and shift as well. And so sometimes that feedback that you get back from people, the feedback is negative because you've caused a disruption in their pattern. And it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue this change, but oftentimes people interpret that feedback as bad. When in reality, you're just, unfortunately, because when you stop a pattern, if it involves someone else, it's going to affect their life. And so that part was really difficult for me because I had so much personally invested in how other people felt. And I was taking responsibility for other people's feelings, partially because I wanted them to be happy. And then I think also partially because it felt safer that way. If people weren't angry with me, if people weren't upset with me, I was safe. And then this last piece of, how did it become my superpower? It became my superpower when I really started to appreciate it. I think when I got through that piece of being okay with people being upset with me, and I started to realize how much happier I felt and this like deep sense of peace in my body, that anxiety that used to be there went away. And I began to really trust myself and I began to feel a level of happiness I'd not felt before. that's when it started to be my superpower, because I was recognizing it, I was acknowledging it, I was utilizing it in my business and in my life, and it became a part of everything. And so I was embodying it. I was not just talking about it or thinking about it, I was actually taking the actions, right? And so that's when it started to become my superpower. And so that's a bit of what my journey has been with embracing my intuition. I'd love to hear from any of you who are listening how this journey has gone for you, and like maybe what part do you feel like you're at, or is there anything you're struggling with? Or I'd love to hear anything about what this journey has been like for you. It's one of my favorite topics. All right, question number 2 from GPT. You've shared that you were searching for a leader who embodied everything you admired. How did you ultimately realize that the leader was you? So I talk about this on my website, which is one of the paragraphs that I fed Chat GPT, which is why it's asking me this question. And so one of the things I don't think I've maybe talked about very often here on the podcast or at all is I spent a lot of my life, as I was having these experiences, looking for a leader who could tell me what to do. I literally wanted to be told by someone, just do this and you'll have success. Just do this and you'll find happiness. Just do this and you'll find success and happiness and fulfillment. And so I kept looking outside of myself through books, through speakers, through leaders, and especially when I was introduced to personal development in the real estate industry, it was back when I was 33, 34 years old. I was just eating up all these different books, and I was so hungry for all of it. And there were a lot of really good tools that I absolutely took in from those books. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was constantly getting disappointed, because every time I found someone who was like, ooh, I'm going to figure out what I need from them. This is going to be the person. And I would ultimately find out, no, like they can't tell me what to do. There's not just one path, right? Everybody has a different path. And so I kept just getting constantly disappointed. And at some point, it was around like 35 years old, where I realized, okay, I'm exhausted and I'm frustrated from looking so hard. And it was at this point that I had started to meet a lot of really influential people. And by influential, I mean, I had started to meet people who had influence over large numbers of people, authors, speakers, people not only in the real estate industry, because that's where I had started my journey with personal growth, but also because I had initiated it. So, for example, when I started doing retreats in 2017, it was because I really wanted more exposure to higher levels of learning. And I really wanted to show people what was possible. And I think I also wanted to show myself what was possible. So I found that we were reading these different books, like books by Gary John Bishop, Susan Scott, who wrote Fierce Conversations, and these different authors that I really admired. So I started reaching out to these authors, and I asked if they would come and speak at my retreat. And some of them said yes. And so I started to have interactions with speakers and teachers who, not just Susan and Gary, but a number of different people who had all sorts of different kinds of speakers fees. And so I started to organize these retreats that were with speakers in the range of anywhere from $1,000 to $40,000 regularly. And when I started to push myself outside of what I thought what I could possibly do, that's where I really started to learn what I was capable of. And I realized I began to hear the same message from these folks, to look within. And I kept thinking to myself, what does that actually mean? What does that mean, look within? And it wasn't until I started meditating that I began to understand what that meant, that there was some sort of a consciousness or an intelligence that was in each of us, including myself, that I could tap into. And the reason I was led to meditation was because of this book, Tribe of Mentors. And in this book, the author, I believe it's Timothy Ferriss, he interviews over 100 different people from different industries. And I loved it because he asked the same, like 10 questions of each person he interviewed. And I love this because as someone who loves data and loves to get the information to back up what I believe, I began to notice themes. And meditation was a theme. Nearly every single person he interviewed in that book said that much of their success was due to meditation. And I was like, all right, I've got to stop avoiding this. I've got to try it. And part of the reason why I was avoiding it was I didn't want to sit still. I was like, I can't be that person in the corner who's meditating silently, like for like this for like 45 minutes. There's just no way I can do it. I don't want to do it. It sounds boring. What fun is that? And how am I going to find the answers that I want in that? But I decided to try it anyways because I knew that there was something there for me. And I had hit this place where it wasn't really rock bottom, but it was this place where I was at like this end of the road. Like I needed something new to inspire me. And so whenever I get to that place, I know it's time to do something uncomfortable or something that maybe I haven't wanted to try, but I just need to try something new, anything new. And so that led me to another book that I had been avoiding, which was Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And in that book, he has you try uh, 6 different habits for 40 days. And so I committed to doing the habits for 40 days, and meditation was one of them. And in the book, you can do these habits for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. And so I decided to keep it really simple. And I did each habit for like anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes a day. That was it. So meditation for just 2 to 3 minutes a day for 40 days is what really got me started on this journey. And what happened to kind of spike my interest and my curiosity and keep me going was after about day 20, I started to get this feeling in my body like I had just been laying on the beach in Hawaii when I got up from meditation. And that was when I realized, okay, something's happening here. There's something interesting happening. I'm having a direct, like there's a direct correlation. There's something happening that I can feel. What is this? And so if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about this story before about meditation. And so that was really what finally pointed me in this direction of, okay, I've got to look within. This is what everybody keeps saying. I've got to look within. So I started to do meditations then that asked questions, that guided me to ask myself questions, that guided me to ask my higher self, my soul questions. And that guided me to start to pay attention to the fact that I was getting these images in my head. And they were so fast, it was like a beat. It was like I'd ask myself a question and I'd get a picture like that and be so fast that I used to think it was nothing. I used to disregard it entirely. And the more I slowed down, the more I realized that these were actually the messages. The messages came so quickly that I couldn't catch them at first because I was going so fast myself. And so all of this led me to ultimately realize that the answers that I was looking for from that leader was the leader within myself, my higher self, my soul, whatever you want to call it. It was this, it was me. And I think to come to that realization, it's this whole journey that everybody seems to have to go through. And I just recognized like the the characteristics that I was looking for in a leader. I know I have high standards, and at the same time, I also believe that the standards I have for leaders are very achievable. And I think in a lot of ways, we're seeing a lot of shifts happen right now in the world with leadership because some of the basic characteristics that I look for in a leader are not often found. And I think that is shifting now. So, one of those examples I would give in terms of what I look for in a leader is someone who is transparent, someone who has pure intentions, someone who actually has real integrity, and someone who is willing to be vulnerable. I know those are a lot of the things that some people would say are not achievable in leadership. And I just don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true. And so I really valued those things in myself. And I really worked very hard to become that person that could embody each of those things. And I don't do it perfectly, but I do focus on those aspects of myself when it comes to being the leader that I want to be. And so that's when I realized that I was becoming that person that I was looking for. All right. Interesting question. Question number 3. As someone with a background in operations, social work, art, and energy, how do these diverse experiences influence the way you coach and guide others? Great question. And I said first, oh my, in all the ways. So I'll break this down into the 4 different parts. So for operations, my background in operations, it just honestly plays in all the time. So I can look at someone's business and life, and my brain will automatically start searching for efficiencies and how to make it all easier. I realized I was also raised. My mom is very efficient. She's very utilitarian. She is constantly looking for ways to make things easier. That was also partly what she did in her career, but I think also just the way she was wired. So first being raised by her and then being in many positions, which naturally a lot of women are guided towards, right? Like uh, I was guided and led to social work because I love to help people. And I'm really good at prioritizing and being efficient with things that have to do with people. I was an assistant at the Seattle Art Museum. I was an assistant in real estate. Like that stuff has been a part of my life. And so I can look at someone's life and begin to automatically search for ways that they could be more efficient. And so this just automatically enters the conversation when I'm coaching and guiding someone because I'm always looking for ways to make their life easier. And then social work. So with social work, getting my master's in social work, I really wanted to help people. And so after I finished my undergraduate program, I got a double major in art and sociology. I just wasn't ready to be out in the world yet. I didn't have a specific desire to like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm going to go get my MSW. I honestly was looking at all the different programs that the University of Washington offered and thought to myself, well, if I get my degree in social work, that gives me a lot of different options afterwards. Like I just wanted as many options as possible. And I knew that having my master's degree would give me kind of an up on my resume, right? And so what ended up happening though was this program, this 2-year program at UW really gave me a fantastic, was really short and like, slammed in there, a lot of study, but perspective on social justice. And then it helped me to really look at and examine all the different ways in which society has programmed us, especially in the US, specifically around racism, sexism, and a lot of the isms. And so those 2 years was like a crash course into examining ways in which I had experienced privilege as a white person and ways in which being female had played into where I ended up. And so it really made me examine myself and examine what I believed, which was really essential for where I am now, looking back. I was an intern in that program at the VA hospital for a year, which was really eye-opening. I learned real quickly that I did not want to be in hospital social work. I didn't feel like I had learned enough in the world yet to really be of value to people as a social worker in the hospital. And especially as a woman in the VA hospital, didn't feel like the right spot for me. And then I was an intern at a place called Youth in Focus, which is a nonprofit that does photography with kids. Because for about 8 years, I also had a photography business on the side. And I loved art. So having this filter, this lens that I got from my MSW allowed me to truly incorporate all these different factors when I'm working with someone. So I think it's really important for me as a human, let alone a coach or leader or whatever. I think it's really important for me to have this lens and this filter to help me understand how different people from different cultures experience things in the world. And so it absolutely plays a part in how I coach and guide other people. Now, thinking about art, thinking outside the box and getting in touch with our natural ability to create is absolutely key in business. So art has always played a part in my life. I've just been such a huge fan of getting to that space where, again, I didn't realize this when I was younger, but something's being created out of nothing. Like we are, as humans, we are born to create. And so I fell in love with the idea that I could stop time for a moment with my camera. I loved playing with angles and what could I capture in that image that would cause the viewer to pause. I loved that. And I also loved video. And so those things have absolutely influenced my social media, what I put out there. Oftentimes when I'm creating reels for my business, part of what I'm doing is playing. Like, actually, a lot of what I'm doing is playing, which is a whole nother topic. But that gives me a chance to express myself artistically. This podcast gives me a chance to express myself through my voice, which for a long time I didn't do. So art is and always will be a huge part of my life. Now, energy, I talk a lot about energy on the podcast here. So I absolutely use this when I'm coaching and guiding other people because everything is energy. And most people, including myself before I got this education, most people don't realize how there are literal objects or people or relationships that are outside of their business and yet they're impacting their business. And so when I start to talk to them about energy and how it flows and how it moves, I start to talk to them about energetic hygiene and different things that they can do to ensure that they're making decisions in their business and their lives from a clear container, a clear space. So energy absolutely plays a huge role in everything I talk about. Another excellent question from Chat GPT. All right, next question. Can you share a story about a moment when you realized you were truly meant to help others uncover their own leadership? This was an interesting question that I had to really pause and think about. So when I joined Pickett Street Properties in 2012, one of the things my boss, Jesse Moore, said to me in the first like 6 months was that he could see that I was going to develop a class where I was going to teach about the partnership between the CEO and the admin. And I was like, nah, what do you mean? But after those first 6 months, I began to realize the advantage that I had coming into this industry, in this real estate industry, from the Seattle Art Museum and from my time in the school districts and from my MSW. I'd had all this exposure to different leaders. And so I had a skill set that I could see was really needed. And I could see that the real estate industry really lacked leadership and it really lacked the education to help people learn how to be better leaders. And so I did start teaching that class. And that was when I began to realize how people, so many people were completely unaware of their power and of the leadership skills that they already had. In fact, many were already using their leadership skills, quote unquote leadership skills, but they were unaware of the impact. So, meaning they might have a fantastic energy, but they didn't realize the impact. So, they were going into a room angry or upset, and they weren't using their leadership skills or their energy with intention. It was just kind of being thrown around. And so that was when I really realized that that was part of my mission, not just for that industry, but for life, was to help people realize just how powerful they were and that their energy and their presence really did make an impact, whether they thought it did or not. I think one of the worst things you can do is kind of wander around life thinking that you don't have an impact. Yeah, you do. Whether you know it or not, you always have an impact. And so to do that with intention versus not makes a world of difference. The next level of awareness I would say I had happened when I was leading retreats. And so for some reason, I will always have this in my mind. There was this moment when I was in Cle Elum at a house that I had rented, and it was right before everybody walked inside. And I used to do this activity where people would stare into each other's left eye. And I still do that activity quite often because I love it. And so everybody was waiting outside to come into the big room, the main room, and they were lining up. And my friend Sarah was giving them instructions on what to do. And so I was alone in the room by myself. And I always have this moment right before I speak or before I have a retreat begin where I'm like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing? And then I said to myself, oh my gosh, I love this. I could do this every day for the rest of my life. Having the opportunity to help people realize their power and recognize their power is one of my favorite things to do. To see that moment where someone recognizes that they actually have the ability to influence their life in a positive way, in a way that they want, rather than feeling like life just happens to them, is one of the best things, one of the most fulfilling things. And so that's, I think, those are two moments that came to mind when I realized that I was truly part of my mission is to help people realize their power and uncover their leadership. All right, so I want to end this episode with ChatGPT with two oracle cards that I pulled all of you, from my energy oracle deck. So I just asked, what does my collective need to know for this month of May? And the first card that came out on its own was attachment. And I still felt like I was supposed to pull another card. So I did. And I got Magician in the Mirror, number 53. So I'm going to read you a little blip from these two cards. So first, attachment. Perceived need and the choice to let go. In the upright position, this card reveals that your passage forward is being stopped by strong attachments to old patterns or people from the past. The chain at your wrist is bolted to fear from the past or desperation about the future. Although you may wear the mask of pretense or even contentment, you simply can't seem to go forward. The stuff that's keeping you stuck could be physical addictions, emotional patterns, or even old relationships. So I love these cards because I feel like they're always just very accessible. So this card is talking about, is there anything that you think you're holding on to because you believe you need it? And you can really make that choice to let it go. Again, this is like what I mentioned earlier when I talk about helping people identify things in their life that they can let go of energetically. I would look at, what are you eating? What kind of energy are you taking in? Like what music are you listening to? What TV are you watching? What books are you reading? What kind of things are you taking in that you have this perceived need for, but you could really choose to let it go because it would make space for you and it's not actually helping you. And the affirmation for this is, I release attachment and choose peace. Peace. I am strong, free, and able to choose what honors me. All right, and then the Magician and the Mirror. Wow, this is interesting since what we talked about in the episode today. Knowing and using your true power. This card upright represents the culmination of your personal and spiritual power at this time. In the Magician's left hand is the flame of passion and action, and his right hand is a vortex of water and the light of reflection. This highly beneficial card is telling you that you are the magician, and within your grasp are the amazing forces of earth and spirit. The water is the energy of yin, the power of spirit and clarity of thought. The flame is the energy of yang, bringing direction and creativity. Together, they give you the magnificent magic of transformation. The mirror stands beside the magician, reflecting the outer world's response to your choice to use or dismiss the true power that you have. Its silver reflection reveals the future in a mist on the horizon, ready to be magically formed. When you receive the magician upright, you are put on notice that an important and powerful time is at hand. You are the alchemist of your life, and just as an alchemist turns base metals into gold, you are now able to transform your difficulties into true blessings, or great blessings. This is true in every area of your life. Claim your power and embrace your intentions in your heart and in your daily life. Direct your destiny, and the mist of the future will clear into brilliant reality. Wow, I feel like this is quite aligned with what we talked about today, with your superpower being your intuition, and that you have the power to direct it. Wow. Well, thank you all for listening with me. I'd love to hear if you have any follow-up questions about anything that I talked about today, or if you'd like to hear more about a particular question. But I kind of liked this, having Chat GPT ask me questions. It's a different way to get different information from me than what I've ever asked myself before on the podcast. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And one last reminder to please go leave me a review on Apple if you feel inclined to. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much.